Hi, I'm Kylie Ross-Seibert from Retail Alliance, and I'm joined here today by Joey Morgan and our guest, Mary Landgrebe from Retail Inventory Solutions. This is the Retail Is podcast. Welcome, Mary.
Thank you.
We'd love for you to just introduce yourself a little bit about what you do in your business.
Sure. I'm Mary Landgrebe. I'm with Retail Inventory Solutions. It's a consulting company. It's my company. We do consulting with retail clients, all independent retail. So some have multi-locations, but they're all independent retailers. What we focus around is inventory planning, open-to-buy planning, and then strategies to improve profitability and turn rate. So all kinds of different things related to that. And then we provide data that helps retailers make sound decisions around their business with confidence. So yeah. That's the majority of what we do. It lends itself into all kinds of other, I've called myself part-time consultant, part-time counselor over the last 6 months. So.
And I know that's been a big part of our relationship. We've known each other now for quite a few years. So, and you've always had the knowledge, like you've always been interested in the trends that have been going on, you know, things that have been new that affect businesses, not just what you're offering, but, you know, in the wider economy as well. So, and today I think we're going to talk a little bit about what's been happening over the last 6 months, how things have changed and, you know, leading up, well, some would say we're in the holiday season even now. So what's going on? What are the trends? So
I would definitely say that it's our trend right now to talk about the trends. So let's keep going on that. Let's continue with that trend and talk about the trends and why they're so important.
They are important. They are very important.
Yeah. So we recently had just pulled together a webinar on these trends, and you had joined us for that, Mary. So one of the first things was that I just mentioned. I feel like having seen this a lot in the media and different reports and consumer research, that the season has started or is starting basically at the beginning of October. What do you feel has contributed to that?
I think it always has. I think we're noticing it a lot more this year because of a lot of sourcing issues. It is harder to get inventory than it has been in past. So, you know, one of the most important things that a retailer can be doing right now is tracking their orders and what they're receiving. A lot of the orders are placed and they get delayed or shipped later or whatever the case may be. But I think there's just kind of a acceptance almost this year of things in the holiday realm starting just a little bit earlier than they have in the past.
Yeah.
Why is that happening?
There's just been a delay. Like in the apparel business, there were a lot of manufacturers that decided truthfully not to make a fall line because they weren't sure. Those decisions have to be made earlier in the year. And so they either really pared back what they were making or decided not to make it at all. You know, obviously we get 40% of our apparel from China, 60% of our shoes. So that has to be factored in. And then if you factor in the materials that go to other places that are made in China, there were a lot of delays that really just haven't completely worked themselves out in the whole sourcing world. Yeah. So you're seeing that a lot in apparel. The home decor business is a little bit delayed as well, just a little bit different. You're seeing things out, but not the full span of things, which I think is also making the season a little more exciting because there really is a lot of new coming in on a very regular basis.
So just to clarify a little bit, I'm still a little confused. So why would delays in the products make the season earlier?
Well, because they're putting it out as they're getting it, whereas some of them would have held inventory back. So it's shipping as it's being, that's a good question, Joey. It's shipping as it's available. And a lot of times they would hold things to ship or retailers frankly hold things in their back room to put out. And I think with the scarcity of inventory as it's been, it's prudent to get things out even if it's not quite seasonally appropriate. That's why you've always seen it in department store retail. So everybody gets mad because Christmas goes out, about this time of year, but there really isn't a good filler for those big seasonal areas. You don't want to leave them just empty. So you put things in them and then I'll be darned, people buy them. So we can be mad about it all we want or not like it, but it's just kind of.
Oh, you froze a little bit right there.
We missed that last little bit that you just said. But one thing I was going to ask them, what about all of the stuff that they may have already had in the store that they couldn't get rid of for the last 6 months? Does that become holiday stock, or do they do clearance? Like, what happens then?
So most of the retailers that I work with, we were fairly aggressive as the stores were closed to prudently sell it. And sometimes that meant taking discounts. In a lot of cases, it just meant presenting it. There really is disposable income out there and folks were buying. But when the stores opened back up, there were spring, kind of early spring and late winter items that needed to be clearanced and moved through. So I think we saw a lot of that happen. What it did was it left a little bit of a gap in August between when some inventory was coming in. So we did see a little bit of a kind of a stagnation of sales in August in a way that we haven't seen it in the past, but it seemed to be all inventory related.
Okay, it's interesting. So I know there was another trend that we talked about, which I think really does impact this is, and I know people who are independent retailers sort of dread the word Amazon, but their Prime Day, which would have been during summer, has now been shifted, and they think, well, I don't think it's been fully announced, but it's in October as far as we know. So by pushing that back into the holiday season, is that going to be a real threat?
I think you've got to look at retail in a couple of different segments. You've got to look at the big retail and you've got to look at independent retail. And Amazon offers a lot of things that a lot of people offer. Does it necessarily get into what independent retail does? I think it depends on the segment that you're in. If you're in small appliances or some of the things that they put focus around on Prime Day, then you're probably gonna feel the impacts of that. I don't like thinking of Amazon as a competitor to independent retail just because it's so big. And they have the ability to shift things that independent retailers just can't do, nor do they necessarily need to or want to. So they can accommodate their customers, in a personal way, in the way an independent retailer can. So I don't know that it's going to have, it obviously has an impact because there's sales dollars out there that get spent in that direction, but I don't know ultimately how big of an impact it'll have towards independent retailers.
Okay. Do you think, just as a side note, do you think it's worth independent retailers putting their products on Amazon?
I've never found it to be too successful. They have to pay such a high percentage, and the service on it is just, you end up losing so much money on what you're selling that you can sell in different ways that I've never found it to be productive with the clients that I work with. There may be some sectors that it would work.
Okay. All right.
You have to be a pretty big fish in Amazon's world to get any real, to get to the top of the stack, so to speak. They have their own distribution and you're competing really with them. So, it's kind of interesting how you can compete with them on their own platform.
Yeah. So if you were to promote early, what sort of marketing would you do if you were an independent retailer?
Well, I think you really have to plan it out. I was talking about this with a client of mine this morning, that there's a couple of things coming up here. We still have Halloween. Halloween's a huge season. Fall is a really big season, and nobody's ignoring that. There's lots of fall decor that's being sold. Fall colors are selling really well. So the pumpkin oranges, the deeper, darker colors are really out front. So I think you've got to plan out what you're going to look at. Sorry, Joey?
The giant skeletons. Have you guys seen that at Home Depot yet? That 18-foot tall skeleton thing?
Haven't been to Home Depot recently.
I don't know why, but that's something else.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Okay. So, well, let's move on to trend, what we think is number 2, which is about moving to e-commerce. And there's new precedent set this year in sales of e-commerce. And obviously the growth in previous years has just been going up and up. What do you see the impact of that this year?
So I think again, if you look at things in the different segments that they are and look at where independent retailer is, they've had the ability to flex or pivot, so to speak,
Well, we might have to repeat.
into what wants and needs are in a whole different way. Did I phrase?
Yes,
Yeah,
you
you
did.
froze. Can you just repeat that for us?
Yeah, I said, I think with independent retailers, they've just been able to flex in a whole different way to meet their customers' needs. So if, I have clients who don't have e-commerce. And so when everything happened, they immediately shifted to social media. And then, you make a social media presentation, you offer curbside pickup or shipping, or, you invoice them so there's zero contact. There's all kinds of ways to do things. There's no question that e-commerce has gotten a huge jump out of this. It's just where will it settle out? And does it mean the death of brick and mortar? And I'll say definitely not. I think we saw that with even the big retailers. People were craving going to Home Depot, Lowe's, Walmart, Target, not just for groceries, but just for commodities type items.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. Okay. On that note, though, you talked about social media as a selling tool, but I mean, trying to draw people to social and being online versus in store. I mean, if things have grown so much and people are still nervous about getting out there, what's the best way for them to try and reach those customers?
Well, I think it has forced some flexibility in the retailers world too. That whole social selling is a very different marketing than just waiting for the traffic to wander into your store. I do think that personalizing things to the extent of having curbside pickup available, offering, in Virginia, we've not had to close our non-essential businesses ever. Some of them chose to for a period of time, but it was a much shorter period of time than we saw in other areas of the country. So really providing a safe place to shop. People are getting out and spending, but I think having the flexibility to understand what your customers' needs are. So what are their desires? Do they want to come into the store and shop? Do they want to look at your social media page and see what you have and call you up and say, I'd like that top or whatever the case may be, or that fall decoration that you may have shown, and having that available for curbside pickup to where they don't have to have contact. I'm one of those people. I'm staying for the most part home. I've got an elderly parent, and I'm able to work from home. I'm able to shop from home. I'm able to run by my favorite places and pick up food and those kind of things. So I'm still in that position where I'm doing quite a bit of business that way. I've just learned how to shift it differently.
Have you what are your thoughts? Have you heard anything about sort of how cause marketing might be helping with this? I know personally, and with my friend group, and I've seen a lot on like the groups I'm in on social media, that the stores and businesses that are vocal about things and then are paying the right messages, it seems like people want to reward them. So my friend group, they're like, well, let's buy something. Let's get dinner tonight. Well, we're going to buy from this restaurant that had that great post on social media about staying safe, and not this other restaurant that's encouraging people to come in.
I think there is a lot to that. And I think, again, the independents have had such great flexibility. We were talking a little bit before we got on the call about, the differences between the retail sectors, the big retail versus the independent retail. And I'm including restaurant into that because restaurants have also had the ability to flex and they have provided things in all different ways than I'm sure they ever imagined, down to providing meals to cook when you take them home. Yeah. So they prepare the whole thing and you take it home. But I think independent retail has become a cause in itself, because I think there was a lot of attention drawn to it during this time, that these are real people behind real businesses and they're real employment center. And so when you look at having to close down such a large segment of businesses for any period of time, it became a cause in and of itself. So the people who got out there and said, I am Mary and I own my own business and I hope you'll patronize me, and these are the things that I have to offer, has really touched people in a different way. And I think that's contributed to some of the success. But there is, I mean, any business owner you talk to right now, they'll tell you they have never worked so hard for every single nickel they're getting.
Yeah.
So it is really just, it's a different playing field. It's working, but it's a different playing field.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's like a Facebook group locally here in Hampton Roads that really was, from the consumer point of view, like trying to, support those restaurants and small retailers, but more restaurants than anything. And just the people that got behind it, and it really made a difference.
Yeah. I think that's the recognition in the example I gave in our kind of pre-conversation was, you have companies like Pier One that when all this came about, they shut their whole chain down and they counted on their e-commerce without a lot of, typical marketing and promotion and those kind of things. And then you take an independent retailer that sells the same type of items, who either shut their store down or didn't, was on Facebook or Instagram Live talking about their business and promoting their business. And Pier One didn't have that. Their store managers were not going in and connecting with people and doing lives and selling the merchandise from out of the store in the same way that independent retailers were. And I don't mean this to be an advertisement for independent retailers, but I think it's been an impressive group of people, and it's kind of really survival of those who were able to flex with the situation.
Well, you've got so much more power when you're an independent. You have your own social media. You've got that control.
Right.
The bigger stores, it wouldn't matter if you're a Pier One store. You don't necessarily have the ability to post anything.
That's right. And so what happens at the end of that is Pier One shut its entire chain down. I mean, it couldn't survive that. So I don't think we're done seeing that type of retail go away. We've seen some big retailers just fold up and close their doors, and we're not.
The 27 just this year or something.
Yeah, I don't even remember all of them. The ones, there's ones that have completely folded up, and then there's ones that have filed bankruptcy that are clearly on a very detrimental path. So it's really hard to watch from a lot of perspectives, but it does interesting things to the marketplace and can, it's driving rent prices down. It's making negotiations very different for leases. It's creating a very different situation in a shopping center.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you definitely, you obviously are a lot more in this than I am, and you have the research and everything to back it up. It just seems to me that if we're buying online, I either want to buy from someone who I want to support and has a story, or I'm just going to go to Amazon. It seems like those middle, like Pier Ones, are just, why would I go to Pier One when I can buy locally or just do it on Amazon? Mm-hmm. I don't go to Pier One. For to support
really,
it just seems to be the way that it's going, and I think a lot of people that are shopping online, or at least people like it seems like the younger generations, Gen Z and stuff, they want to support, they want a message and a connection with their product.
Yeah, and that's been one of the things that the owners have really had to play an active role. Even if they had somebody else doing their social media, they've had to jump in and be the face of the company. Mm-hmm. And it's very different for them. A lot of them have not been comfortable, as a lot of people aren't, in front of a camera, but they've done it and they've created a different connection, and it really is working.
Much more personal, I feel.
It is. It really has changed a lot of things as far as connecting with the customer.
So I know, going back to your comment about, maybe having the different type of, bringing people in store still, that, whether it's delivery or curbside or whatever it is. But the third trend that we were talking about was that stores are still vital. The stores are still, relevant, maybe a little bit more for fulfillment than it was for shopping, because safety is a concern. But let's talk a little bit about that trend. So having to pivot to curbside delivery, and for restaurants, the same thing, not having the dine-in. How do you think, what was your perception of how that all sort of occurred? And
well, I think again, it's a shift, but it hasn't completely died off. So, people are saying it's all e-commerce. Well, I don't know that we've seen it all settle out yet. There's, again, no question that the e-commerce popped, but people are still shopping in stores, and you're seeing it a lot. In different parts of the country, it's more prominent than others, where it just really, it has had very little impact in some places.
Right.
And so they haven't had to shift, as much as some of the others. But again, it goes to kind of how the owner has handled that, and the connection that the owner is making with the customers.
BOPUS is buy online, pick up in store is a bit of a trend as well, to try and draw those people into the store, maybe treating them a little differently, with the curbside pickup, or having a different register just for them for safety purposes, because that is the biggest concern.
Well,
so
safety and convenience. This whole pickup at the store started before we had a pandemic. The grocery stores were starting to offer that. You do your order, we'll get it all bagged up for you, and you pull up to the curb and pick it up and ride off. That all started before the pandemic. I think mercifully for the grocery business, because they were a little more prepared to deal with things in that way than maybe the rest of the world. They still had to shift and adjust, and it was very, it became a demand in a whole nother way. But when you look at where the staffing, so, reading up where are companies hiring for, and where are they staffing? They're staffing the same amounts, if not more, in their stores. If you look at the number that Target's hiring, and Home Depot, and those kind of places for seasonal help, they're hiring the same and or more employees than they had in the past. They're just utilizing them in different ways.
I did see that there was like one of the big boxes were bringing on like hundreds of thousands of employees, but they were all for fulfillment. They weren't going to be necessarily in store, in each department. It was going to be for pickup.
Independents are having to do that to some extent as well, to hire for not necessarily customer facing, but some of the shipping or preparing things, or people to just keep the stores clean. In the apparel world, again, people are always going to want to see, feel, and touch. So, most people want to try on a pair of shoes, or try on a top, or at least women in particular do. And we're seeing that definitely, in a trend. So it's, again, they're having to do things like hire people to clean. So having additional hours for cleaning, which in apparel world, a lot of it's steaming, because you can use the steam to be very sanitary in a retail environment, and retail apparel environment. But the fulfillment is also an issue. If you have curbside pickup, you have to get that ready. You're throwing the sale up. It has to be ready to go and run out to the car. So someone has to be manning both. Can't just have one person in the store. Yeah, that's true. So is there anything else on that trend that was like that was our third trend? I know we've got two more to go. We're sort of running a little towards the time. No. This is really interesting. So we talked earlier about having shipping delays and things from China, and also I know essential goods were the priority. So some of things had been held back because of those essential, antibacterial and stuff like that. So one of the number 4 trend is the last mile delivery will run out of capacity. For people who don't understand what that is literally from where it is from the store to the door. It's that last, when it goes out for delivery. I think it's all of the above, though, because it's getting goods. That's why a lot of the stores I'm working with are front loading product for fourth quarter. They're buying it earlier than they necessarily would have, which does a lot of things to the business. But to make sure that they have it in time to take care of the customer. But that whole shipping piece of it, we've seen the post office has been jammed up. FedEx is at a different capacity, so is UPS. So you've got,
and they're charging now as well.
Mm-hmm.
Those main carrier.
What did you say?
Well, the main carriers are all charging extra surcharges.
Yeah, they are.
So you've got to take that into account and that's how I think as an independent, you can set yourself apart. For people to come in store. You don't have the delay. Right. You don't have the extra cost of the shipping. There is advantages to having a storefront.
Well, in the height of this, in the height of the pandemic, I would consider it like kind of March, April, May. If you ordered something from Amazon, you were no longer getting it in a day. It was taking up to 2 weeks to get delivery. And you could order from an independent, and I did. Like, I made a conscious effort, obviously, with what I do, to order from independents. And I would have some things sometimes within a day or two. So their ability to react to a situation has been completely different.
Yeah.
So again, shop small.
Yeah, it's incredibly important. I think what you were saying too about making those buys a little earlier as well. Like you don't leave it. I mean, a lot of people have already done their Christmas buys earlier anyway in the year, haven't they?
Markets happen differently this year. Like in a lot of cases, so the markets that the retailers go to, a lot of those flat out didn't happen. So it was dealing direct with manufacturers to source goods, which was a whole different channel than the manufacturers were used to, which is created a whole nother set of delays. And then when you have limited product, you've got to kind of be the squeaky wheel. That's why I talk about so much the importance of order tracking. Once you place an order, having a tickler file or some way, if your point of sale system doesn't track it, you've got to have some way to know exactly what you've got out there so that you're following up with regularity. Because I always say the very polite squeaky wheel is the one who gets the grease, and you can't be, you've got to be relentless with sourcing goods, but at the same time you can't be obnoxious.
And
Right.
So on that note though, in terms of the market, do you think that would be a permanent change, that people are going to get used to dealing straight with the manufacturers?
No, I've had more, again, and most of my clients are women's apparel, home decor. I have some bookstores and some sporting goods that I work with, but in particular in women's apparel, they feel kind of hogtied by not being able to see, feel, and touch in the same way that we go shop. You know, I, as the consumer, go see, feel, and touch. They feel that way, and not being able to make those selections at market. It's very, very difficult to know exactly what you're getting. So
that's a good point.
There are some markets happening now, and then, you know, LA, the apparel district is open in a limited capacity. So there are some ways to source goods that are just, you know, a little less handy than people are used to, but they're used to being able to go to market, you know, 4 times a year and being able to source what they need. And a lot of that involves New York and Las Vegas, and those just were not available.
So I mean, that would have take so much more time now, having to do it all individually. Yes. I can imagine having, you know, not just going to one place and getting everything for the holiday season, you know.
Right. It takes a lot more time, and then, you know, again, the follow-up that it takes to make sure you know what's coming and when it's coming and how that's going to impact your cash flow, as far as, you know, with what's going on. Are you you know, buying the right numbers? Are you inflating your inventory to a point where it's going to really hurt your cash flow? And then, you know, there are still some questions about what's going to take place in fourth quarter. Are people really shopping early? Are they going to shop as much or as deep as they have in the past? You know, technically we're in a recession, but it doesn't truly feel that way in the apparel world with the way people are spending money.
Mm-hmm. And I was there was a webinar the other day from a financial company, and they were saying, like, this recession is very different to previous recessions, where the rebound is a lot quicker than in previous recessions. So it may be that the end, that we're coming out of it already. We just, you know, it's a wait and see, really.
It feels like almost, I've said this a couple of times, but it feels like almost a fake recession. And somebody who's lost their job probably doesn't feel that way. But it feels like a very, very temporary situation based on circumstances that are tangible. And most recessions are based on circumstances that are not really tangible. So it's kind of the flow of the market, so to speak. This is fixable. I mean, this is a fixable situation if we can all behave ourselves a little bit for a little bit longer.
So Jerry, do you remember what the last trend was?
No, I can look it up for you though.
No. I think I had it
You have it
read it.
memorized?
It's about media and the clutter. I mean, we've got it's elections
yeah.
here. There is like the health pandemic. You know, there's economic
Clutter
issues.
in
There's
the
so much
media.
going on. So
Clutter
cutting
in the
through
media.
that. Yeah.
And I think that goes back to differentiating yourself as a retailer, what you do, what you have, who you are, how it impacts your family, how it impacts your employees. The media is telling kind of one story about retail, and this is kind of the tendency. They're talking about retail as a whole, and if you lump it all together, it tells a very different picture than if you peel it apart in its pieces. So you know, you've got your cluster of what I would call Home Depot, Target, Walmart, Lowe's, those that thrive during the, if you look at the stock prices of any one of those companies, it dipped, it went completely down in March, and then it soared. And their stock prices are probably higher than they've ever been. So those are companies that are financially doing well. I know Target's probably very thankful because they were having their own struggles. But then you take the mid-sized retailers. So you take a Steinmart or some of the mid-sized folks that really were kind of bumping along and struggling a little bit. That's a different segment. And I say Steinmart, Pier One, some of the chains that really have just been kind of bumping along and were in some pretty brutal leases. That kind of brought everything to a screeching halt. So, and then you've got the independent retailers, and the independent retailers have had some really amazing flexibility with PPP and EIDL loans, and having the ability to negotiate their leases with their landlords, having that individual contact with their landlords. Most of the landlords played along. I mean, for the most part, I would say,
And they could, yeah.
in the client group that I've got, and again, I'm in 24 states. Canada, and then I always like to point out I've got one in Alaska because that's kind of fun. But I've got a kind of broad view of what went on across each of the parts of the United States, and I would say probably 90% of the landlords really took a haircut with the retailers when they needed it most. So that March and April, and then they were able to come back with, you know, PPP and EIDL money to help satisfy some of those needs. So the media really kind of lumps it all together, but if you peel it apart, it really has a very, very different picture.
Mm-hmm. And I think getting that cut through, you know, being able to communicate that uniqueness about getting your products earlier, you know, without the shipping delays, to be able to, you know, do the pickups, you know, being able to know who your customers are through social media, to be able to target them, personalize an offer to them. You know, there's just so much more opportunity to cut through that they can take advantage of.
Yeah.
As you say, you segment retail, but you also segment your customers as well. So if you can sort of look at who's comfortable, who's feeling safe, who's, you know, a little bit still can't come in yet, but and do different offers to those different segments, I think, you know, small businesses could really come through very well with this.
Yeah, I don't think there's any retailer that you could look at under any circumstances before or after the pandemic that will sit still and say everything's good. I think they all have a natural fear that the world's going to come to a stop and nobody's ever going to come into their store again. And you know, that's just it's a very common fear when you have a business that all of a sudden it's just everything's going to stop. I think what we showed during this pandemic is that won't happen under any circumstances, because this was probably the most brutal of circumstances for a retailer or any other business owner to go through.
Yeah, there was no build up. It was like bang.
I mean, it just stopped. I mean, I know, I can tell you where I was and what was going through my mind, and I thought, surely the whole country can't shut down. I mean, surely we can handle this. And then things started to unfold, and they started to unfold in different pockets. They unfolded for me first. My client in Colorado, she's in the Breckenridge area, which was, you know, this was the beginning of spring break for her. It's her biggest week of the year. And they shut the ski slopes down. And she said, I don't know if anybody's going to come if the ski slopes are shut. Well, but 2 days later, they shut the whole town down. And so she called me and said, the store's going to have to close. And it was the next day after that Los Angeles closed, which, you know, California, I should say California, but the LA market was the secondary source for getting product after China. So it's like, oh, good gracious, where are we going to get product from? So there's been a just kind of messy unfolding of all of this that has been kind of cruel, but I think it also has taught retailers that they can survive anything if they're willing to. And I hate the word pivot. I like the word flex. If they,
okay, let's see it.
It's like I'm so tired. There's certain terms I'm just like, ugh. Pivot's one of them, and it's like
unprecedented. Hey.
yeah, but if they're flexible, if they can bend and be flexible and really understand their business and their clients, I think they've captured a whole different group and whole different piece of loyalty, like Joey was talking about with his friend group. I think people understand that small businesses really are the economic engine to this country, and we have to keep them vital.
Mm-hmm. We agree completely. Yeah.
All right. Well, we are out of time, Kylie.
I know. It was lovely to speak to you, Mary.
Lovely to speak to you guys too. Thanks for having me.
We'll talk again soon.